My son left for work one morning 25 years ago and never came back. The police found his car abandoned by the river gorge, but they never found a body. We buried an empty casket, and I spent 2 decades mourning a ghost while his wife played the grieving widow. But yesterday, while eating cold soup in the basement, my daughter-in-law calls an apartment. I saw a face on the 6 o'clock news that stopped my heart. It was a billionaire real estate tycoon in Seattle cutting the ribbon on a new skyscraper. He had a different name and expensive clothes, but when the camera zoomed in, I saw the crescent-shaped scar on his chin. I gave him that scar stitching him up on our kitchen table when he was 10 years old. That was my son. He was alive. And when I screamed for his wife, she didn't look surprised, she looked terrified. That was the moment I realized my entire life was a lie, constructed by the 2 people I loved most. Before I tell you how I escaped the prison they built for me, please like this video and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by your own family. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Jerry Dawson, and for the last 5 years I have lived in the basement of the house I paid for. My daughter-in-law Monica tells the neighbors she is a saint for taking care of her senile father-in-law. She tells them I am confused, that my mind is slipping, and that I need constant supervision. But the truth is much simpler. I am in the way. I am a budget line item she wants to erase. The basement is cold and smells of mildew. It has one small window near the ceiling that lets in just enough light to tell me if it is day or night. My dinner that evening was potato soup again. It was lukewarm and tasteless because Monica says salt is bad for my blood pressure. I think she just hopes I will lose my appetite and fade away faster. I sat in my worn-out armchair, the only piece of furniture she let me keep from my old life, and turned on the small television set. It is my only window to the outside world. Monica controls the cable box upstairs, so I have to watch whatever she thinks is appropriate for a man she claims has dementia. Usually, it is cartoons or old reruns, but tonight she must have slipped up because the local news was on. I was absent-mindedly stirring my soup, not really paying attention, until the anchor announced a special report from Seattle. A new technology and real estate conglomerate called Thorn Enterprises was breaking ground on a billion-dollar tower. The reporter was breathless with excitement, talking about the visionary CEO who had come from nowhere to dominate the market. Then the camera cut to the podium. A man in a bespoke navy suit stepped up to the microphone. The chyron on the screen read, "William Thorne, CEO." He looked distinguished with silver at his temples and the kind of confidence that only extreme wealth can buy. He smiled at the crowd and began to speak about legacy and building the future. My spoon clattered into the bowl, splashing soup onto my lap. I didn't feel the heat. I couldn't breathe. The voice was deeper and more refined, but the cadence was identical. The way he tilted his head to the left when he paused. The way he gripped the sides of the podium. It was Brandon. My Brandon. My brain tried to reject it. Grief does strange things to a parent. I have seen my son in the faces of strangers 1,000 times over the last 25 years. I have chased young men down the street because they had his walk or his hair color, only to apologize like a crazy old man when they turned around. But this was different. The camera pushed in for a tight shot of his face as he laughed at a joke from the mayor. And there it was. On the left side of his chin, just below the lip, was a thin white line curved like a crescent moon. It was a jagged scar. He got it when he was 10 years old, trying to jump his bicycle over a creek in our backyard. He had smashed his chin on a rock. We didn't have health insurance back then, so I cleaned it with rubbing alcohol and stitched it up myself with a sewing needle and fishing line while he squeezed my hand and tried not to cry. No 2 scars are identical. That was my handiwork. That was my son. He wasn't dead. He was William Thorne. I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. I rushed to the television, my hands shaking so hard I could barely touch the screen. I traced the line of his jaw. He was older. He looked harder, but he was alive. He had been alive this whole time. While I wept over an empty grave, while I paid for his memorial service, while I comforted his weeping wife, he was building an empire in Seattle. "Monica," I screamed. It was a guttural sound I didn't recognize. "Monica, get down here." I heard heavy footsteps above me. Then the door at the top of the stairs flew open. Monica descended, her heels clicking sharply on the wooden steps. She was wearing her tennis outfit and a look of pure irritation. She hated being interrupted, especially during her evening glass of wine. "What is it, Jerry?" she snapped, standing at the bottom of the stairs with her hands on her hips. "You spilled your soup. I am not cleaning that up. You are behaving like a child." I ignored her. I pointed a trembling finger at the television screen. "Look. Look at him." Monica rolled her eyes and turned toward the TV. She started to say something dismissive, probably about how I shouldn't get worked up over the news, but the words died in her throat. I watched her face closely. I saw the blood drain from her cheeks. Her eyes went wide and her mouth opened slightly. It wasn't the confusion of someone who didn't understand. It was the shock of someone who had been caught. For a split second, the mask of the grieving widow slipped, and I saw the cold calculation underneath. She recognized him instantly. "That is Brandon," I said, my voice raspy. "That is my son. He is alive, Monica. Look at the scar." She stared at the screen for another second, her mind clearly racing. Then she snapped into action. She lunged for the remote control that was sitting on the side table. "Give me that," she hissed. She pressed the power button hard. The screen went black. The image of my son vanished, leaving only our reflections in the dark glass. My reflection was a disheveled old man. Hers was a woman caught in a lie. "Turn it back on," I demanded, stepping toward her. "I need to hear him. I need to know why." "Stop it, Dad," she shouted, using that condescending tone she reserved for doctors and neighbors. "You are having an episode again. This is exactly what Dr. Sterling warned us about. You are hallucinating." "I am not hallucinating," I roared. "That was Brandon. He has the scar, Monica. The scar I gave him. He is William Thorne. I saw the name." Monica stepped back, her face hardening into a stone mask. "There is no William Thorne, Jerry. That was just a random man on the news. Brandon died 25 years ago. We buried him. Do you remember the funeral? Do you remember the flowers? Your mind is playing tricks on you. It is the dementia. It is getting worse." She was gaslighting me. She had been doing it for years, making me question my memory, my sanity, my reality. But this time I had seen the truth, and it was sharper than any knife. "I know what I saw," I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. "And I saw your face, Monica. You knew. You weren't surprised that he looked like Brandon. You were scared because I saw it." She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and marched to the medicine cabinet mounted on the wall by the laundry sink. She unlocked it with the key she kept on a chain around her neck. She took out the orange bottle, the heavy sedatives, the ones that made my thoughts feel like they were wading through molasses, the ones that made me sleep for 12 hours at a time. "You are agitated," she said, shaking 2 pills into her palm. Her hand was trembling just slightly. "You need to calm down before you hurt yourself. Take these, now." I clamped my mouth shut. I stepped back until my back hit the cold concrete wall. "No, I am not taking them. I need to call the police. I need to call the station in Seattle." Monica laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. "Call the police with what, Jerry? I took the landline out last week, remember? And you don't have a cell phone. Who are they going to believe, a wealthy, respected widow or a senile old man who lives in a basement and sees ghosts on the television?" She walked toward me, closing the distance. She was younger than me, stronger than me, and fueled by a desperate panic. She grabbed my jaw with one hand, her nails digging into my loose skin. "Take the pills, Jerry. Or do I have to call the orderlies from Sunny Meadows tonight? You know they are just waiting for my call. They have a bed ready for you in the memory care ward." Sunny Meadows, the state-run facility, the place where people went to die alone in hallways that smelled of urine and bleach. It was her ultimate threat. I opened my mouth. She shoved the pills onto my tongue and held a glass of water to my lips. "Swallow," she commanded. I took a sip of water. I felt the pills slide back. I swallowed. "Good," she said, releasing my jaw. She wiped her hands on her tennis skirt, as if she had touched something filthy. "Now sit down. Relax. The hallucinations will stop soon." She grabbed the remote control and put it in her pocket. Then she walked to the stairs. She paused at the bottom, looking back at me. Her eyes were dark and unreadable. "Brandon is dead, Jerry. Never say that name again. If you mention William Thorne or scars or any of this nonsense to anyone, I will have you committed before breakfast. Do you understand?" I nodded slowly, slumping into my chair. She turned off the overhead light, leaving me in the dim glow of the basement window. I heard her walk up the stairs. I heard the heavy deadbolt slide into place, locking me in. As soon as her footsteps faded into the kitchen above, I leaned forward and spit the pills into my hand. I had hidden them under my tongue. It was a trick I learned 3 months ago when I realized the medicine was making me forget things I shouldn't forget. I walked to the utility sink and flushed them down the drain. I wasn't crazy. I was a forensic accountant for 40 years before I retired. I spent a lifetime finding patterns in numbers, finding the truth that people tried to hide in ledgers and spreadsheets. My son was alive. He was a billionaire. And the woman upstairs, who had been cashing his life insurance checks and living in my house for a quarter of a century, knew exactly where he was. I sat back in the dark, listening to the hum of the furnace. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was clear for the first time in years. They thought I was a helpless old man. They thought I was a burden to be managed. But they had made a fatal mistake. They had let me see the truth. And tomorrow morning, before the sun came up, I was going to find out exactly what Monica and my son had done. I wasn't going to Sunny Meadows. I was going to war. I did not sleep that night. I lay on the lumpy mattress in the basement, staring at the ceiling tiles, listening to the house settle above me. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a threat. My mind was a whirlwind of memories and calculations. I replayed the news broadcast in my head 1,000 times. The scar, the tilt of the head, the name William Thorne. It was impossible, and yet it was the only thing that made sense. My grief had been a heavy coat I wore for 25 years, and in a single instant, it had been ripped away, leaving me shivering in the cold light of betrayal. When the sun finally began to bleed through the small basement window, I heard the garage door opener hum to life. It was too early for Monica to be going to the tennis club. I waited for the sound of her car engine, but it never came. Instead, I heard a car door slam shut, and then silence. She was sitting in her car in the closed garage. It was the only place in the house she thought was truly soundproof. I moved. My joints were stiff from the cold and the stress, but adrenaline is a powerful fuel. I crept up the wooden stairs, placing my feet on the edges where the wood was less likely to squeak. I reached the door at the top. It was locked from the outside, as always, but there was a gap between the door and the floor, a sliver of space where sound could travel. I pressed my ear against the cold wood. At first, I only heard mumbles muffled by the walls and the distance. I held my breath. I needed to hear. I needed to know. Then her voice rose sharp and panicked, cutting through the silence. "He saw you, William. He recognized the scar." My heart stopped. She wasn't calling him Brandon. She was calling him William. She had accepted his new identity, his new skin so completely that his birth name, the name I gave him, didn't even exist to her anymore. "I know it was a mistake," she hissed. "I tried to tell him he was hallucinating. I gave him the heavy dose. But he is not buying it this time. He is fighting back." He mentioned the police. There was a pause as she listened to the voice on the other end. "My son. The billionaire. The ghost." "No, we cannot just wait," she snapped. "He is dangerous, William. He knows too much. If he gets out, if he talks to anyone, your IPO, your reputation, it all goes up in smoke. We have to accelerate the timeline." Accelerate the timeline. The words hung in the stale air of the stairwell like a guillotine blade. They had a plan. They had always had a plan. I was just an expiration date that hadn't arrived yet. "Yes, I know the place," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Sunny Meadows. It is cheap, it is dirty, and they do not ask questions as long as the check clears. They have a lockdown unit for difficult cases. Once he is in there, he will never get out. He will just be another babbling old man that nobody listens to." I backed away from the door, my hands trembling so hard I had to grip the railing to keep from falling. Sunny Meadows. I knew the place. It was a converted warehouse on the edge of town, a place where the state dumped the indigent and the unwanted. It was a place where people went to rot. That was her solution. That was my son's solution. To bury me alive in a place that smelled of bleach and despair so they could keep their millions. I heard the garage door open again. She was coming back inside. I scrambled down the stairs, throwing myself into the armchair, just seconds before I heard her footsteps in the kitchen. I picked up a magazine and pretended to read, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I needed help. I needed a lifeline. Wait. The kitchen phone. Monica had said she removed the landline, but maybe she was lying. Maybe she just unplugged it. It was my only chance. I waited until I heard the shower running upstairs. The pipes in this old house groaned loudly when the water was on. It would mask the sound of my movement. I went to the basement door. To my surprise, it was unlocked. She must have forgotten to throw the deadbolt in her panic, or maybe she just assumed the sedatives had turned me into a vegetable. I slipped into the kitchen. It was blindingly bright after the gloom of the basement. I scanned the counter. The phone base was there. My heart leaped. I rushed over and picked up the receiver. Silence. No dial tone. No static. Just a dead, hollow silence. I pulled the unit away from the wall. The cord hadn't been unplugged. It had been cut. The copper wires were frayed and twisted, severed with a pair of kitchen shears. It wasn't just a disconnection. It was an act of violence. She hadn't just cut the line, she had cut my throat. "What do you think you are doing, Jerry?" I spun around. Monica was standing in the doorway, wrapped in a plush white bathrobe, her hair wet. She wasn't wearing makeup, and without it she looked older, harder. Her eyes were cold chips of flint. I was checking the time, I lied, my voice sounding thin and weak in my own ears. "The clock downstairs is broken." She looked at the phone in my hand, then at the severed cord. A cruel smile touched her lips. "It is broken, Jerry. Just like your mind. I told you that last night. Why do you insist on fighting me? I am the only one who takes care of you." She walked over and gently took the receiver from my hand, placing it back on the cradle with a soft click. "We need to talk about your living arrangements," she said, her tone shifting into that sickeningly sweet register she used when she was manipulating me. "I have been doing a lot of thinking since your episode last night. It is becoming too dangerous for you to be here alone. You are seeing things. You are becoming aggressive." "I am not aggressive," I said, standing as tall as my spine would allow. "I am lucid. Monica, and I know what you are doing." She ignored me, continuing her rehearsed speech. I found a wonderful place for you. A community. It is called Sunny Meadows. They have specialists there, Jerry. Doctors who can help you with your hallucinations. They have activities and gardens. It will be so much better for you than that dark basement. Gardens. She called a patch of dead grass surrounded by a chain-link fence a garden. I am not going, I said firmly. This is my house. I paid for every brick. My name is on the deed. For now, she said, casually examining her fingernails. But we have a meeting with Dr. Evans this afternoon. He is going to evaluate you. And considering your violent outburst last night and your history of confusion, I am confident he will agree that you need 24-hour care. And once he signs those papers, Jerry, you won't have a choice. The state will grant me guardianship. She leaned in close, her perfume smelling of lilies and rot. And then I will sell this house. I will liquidate your accounts. And I will move to Seattle to be closer to better opportunities. And you will stay at Sunny Meadows until the end. It is for the best. She turned and walked to the refrigerator, opening it and taking out a carton of orange juice. Oh, and speaking of care, it is time for your medicine. You missed your morning dose because you were sneaking around up here. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the bottle. She shook 2 pills into her hand. They were blue this time, stronger. Open up, she commanded. I looked at her. I looked at the kitchen knives on the magnet strip. I looked at the back door. I could run. But I was 71 years old, with bad knees and no money. She would catch me, or the police would catch me, and she would tell them I was a danger to myself. I had to be smarter. I had to buy time. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face go slack, giving her the look of defeat she wanted to see. Fine, I whispered. Just let me rest. Good boy, she said. I opened my mouth. She placed the pills on my tongue. Her fingers tasted of soap. I took the glass of water she offered. I took a large gulp. I threw my head back and swallowed, making a show of the effort. But I didn't swallow. I slid the pills into the pocket of my cheek, tucked deep between my gums and the soft tissue. It was a trick I had seen in a movie once, a prison movie. I prayed it would work. She watched me closely, her eyes scanning my throat for the movement of the swallow. Satisfied, she smiled. There. That wasn't so hard, was it? Now go back downstairs. Pack a small bag. The transport van will be here tomorrow morning at 8. Tomorrow. I had less than 24 hours. I shuffled back to the basement door, moving slowly, playing the part. I heard her lock the door behind me, the heavy thud of the bolt sealing my fate. I walked to the utility sink and spat the blue pills into the drain, watching them dissolve into a chalky paste before washing them away. They thought they had won. They thought I was a confused old man who would go quietly into the night. But they had forgotten who I used to be. I was the man who found the hidden assets in the Enron investigation. I was the man who traced illicit funds through shell companies in the Cayman Islands. I walked to the corner of the basement where my old filing cabinet sat, rusting under a tarp. Monica had gone through it years ago looking for money, but she had only looked at the files. She hadn't looked at the cabinet itself. I reached behind the bottom drawer and felt for the metal latch I had installed 30 years ago. It clicked. The false bottom of the drawer popped up. Inside was not money. It was something more valuable. It was my old lock-picking kit from my days working with the fraud unit and a prepaid burner phone I had bought 5 years ago and hidden for an emergency just like this. I pressed the power button on the phone. The screen flickered to life. 15% battery. It was enough. I wasn't going to Sunny Meadows, and I wasn't going to let William Thorne build his empire on my grave. I sat on the floor, the tools cold in my hand, and waited for the house to go quiet. The real game was just beginning. The silence that followed the sound of Monica's Mercedes retreating down the driveway was the loudest thing I had ever heard. I counted to 60 just to be sure she wasn't coming back for a forgotten phone or a second coat of lipstick. Then I went to work. I had 2 hours, maybe 3 if the lawyer kept her waiting. It was a lifetime for a man with nothing to lose, but it was a blink of an eye for what I needed to do. I pulled the lockpick set from my pocket. The metal picks felt cold and familiar, a comforting weight from a past life I thought I had buried. My hands were gnarled with arthritis and shook with a tremor that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with rage, but muscle memory is a powerful thing. I knelt before the basement door. The lock was a simple deadbolt, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $20. It was an insult, really. She thought so little of me she didn't even buy a quality lock. I inserted the tension wrench, then the rake. I closed my eyes, visualizing the pins inside the cylinder. Click. Click. A resisting grind. Then the sweet, smooth rotation of the plug. The door swung open. I stepped into the kitchen. It was strange to stand in my own home as an intruder. The air smelled of cleaning products and the stale scent of lies. I didn't waste time. I went straight to the second floor, to the room that used to be my study. Monica had claimed it 5 years ago, turning it into her command center. She kept the door locked always. This lock was harder, a keypad lever. But Monica was creature of habit, and she was arrogant. She used the same 4-digit code for everything. The year she married my son. I punched it in. The light turned green. The room was unrecognizable. My mahogany desk was gone, replaced by sleek glass and chrome. My books were gone, replaced by framed photos of her and Laura on vacations I was never invited to, but I wasn't here for the decor. I went straight to the wall behind the oversized abstract painting of a storm at sea. I knew the safe was there because I was the one who installed it 30 years ago. Monica had changed the combination, of course, but she didn't know about the manufacturer override key slot hidden under the digital pad. And she certainly didn't know I had kept the master key taped to the underside of a floorboard in the closet since 1995. I retrieved the key and inserted it. The heavy steel door swung open with a groan. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear and anticipation. I ignored the stacks of cash and the velvet jewelry boxes. I reached for the back of the safe for a thick manila envelope that sat in the shadows. It wasn't labeled. I dumped the contents onto the glass desk. Papers slid out. Bank statements. But not from our local branch. These were from a private bank in the Cayman Islands. The account holder was Monica Dawson. I scanned the columns, my accountant eyes processing the data faster than I could breathe. Every month on the first, like clockwork, there was a deposit. $50,000. The sender was Thorn Enterprises, Seattle, WA. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. $50,000 a month. That was the price of a mother's silence. That was the hush money my son paid to keep his past dead. She wasn't just surviving on his life insurance, she was on his payroll. Under the statements, there was a bundle of postcards held together by a rubber band. The edges were worn. I snapped the band and fanned them out. They were all picture postcards from Seattle. The Space Needle, Pike Place Market, the ferry boats. I turned one over. The handwriting was jagged, rushed, but familiar. Happy 16th birthday, Laura. I hope you got the car. Study hard. It was signed simply. Another one. Happy graduation. I am proud of you. Another. Merry Christmas. They were addressed to my granddaughter, Laura, but they had no postmarks. They had never been mailed. Monica had intercepted them, or perhaps they had been sent in a package directly to her to filter. She had kept them. Why? Trophies. Leverage. Proof that he existed just in case the checks stopped coming. My son, William Thorne, had been writing to his daughter for years. He knew she existed. He watched her grow up from a distance, sending money and cards, while I rotted in the basement, believing he was dead. I was so absorbed in the betrayal, so lost in the paper trail of my own erasing, that I didn't hear the front door open downstairs. I didn't hear the light footsteps on the stairs. "Grandpa," the voice made me jump so hard I nearly knocked the lamp off the desk. I spun around. Laura stood in the doorway. She was wearing her nurse's scrubs, her bag slipping from her shoulder. She had come home early from her shift. Her eyes were wide, darting from my face to the open safe to the papers scattered on the desk. She looked terrified. "What are you doing?" she whispered, taking a step back. Mom said you were getting worse. She said you might get violent." I stood up slowly, raising my hands. I looked like a madman, I knew that. My hair was wild, my clothes were stained with basement grime, and I was standing over a pile of stolen documents. "Laura, listen to me," I said, my voice cracking. "I am not crazy. Your mother lied to you." She reached into her pocket, her hand shaking. I knew she was reaching for her phone. She was going to call Monica. If she made that call, it was over. The orderlies would be here in 10 minutes. "Don't call her," I pleaded. "Please, just look. Look at this." I grabbed the stack of postcards and the bank statement. I held them out to her, my hand trembling. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. "Grandpa, you need to go back downstairs." "Laura, look at the postcards," I said, desperate. "They are for you. They are from your father." That stopped her. She froze. "My father is dead," she said, her voice hard. "He died before I could remember him." "No," I said. "He isn't. He is William Thorne. He lives in Seattle. He sends your mother $50,000 a month to keep it a secret." I saw the conflict in her face, the fear warring with curiosity. The name William Thorne meant something to her. Everyone knew the name now. I took a step forward and placed the postcards on the corner of the desk nearest to her. "Just read them," I said. "If I am crazy, then these are just scribbles. But if I am right—" She looked at me, then at the cards. Slowly, warily, she stepped into the room. She reached out and picked up the top card. She read it, then the next, then the next. I watched her face crumble. She recognized the handwriting. Maybe she had seen it on old documents, or maybe deep down she just knew. She picked up the bank statement. She saw the numbers. She saw the sender. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Why would Mom hide this? Why would she lie?" "Because she is being paid to lie," I said gently. "Because as long as we think he is dead, she gets the money, and I get the basement." Laura looked up at me. The fear was gone, replaced by a dawn of horror. She dropped the papers. She looked at the open safe, then back at me. "She is putting you in a home tomorrow," she said, her voice hollow. "She signed the papers this morning. She told me it was the only way to keep us safe. She said you were dangerous." "I am not dangerous, Laura. I am just a witness. And now so are you." We heard the sound of the garage door opening downstairs, the heavy rumble of the Mercedes engine. Monica was home. Panic flared in Laura's eyes. She grabbed my arm. "She is here. If she finds you in here, if she sees that you opened the safe, she will kill me," I finished for her, "or she will make sure I never speak again." Laura looked at the window, then at the back stairs. "Go," she whispered. "I cannot just go," I said. "I have no money. I have no way to get to Seattle." Laura didn't hesitate. She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. She took out a credit card. It was a black card, a supplementary card attached to Monica's account. "Take it," she said, pressing it into my hand. "The PIN is your birthday. Mom used it for my tuition, but she never checks the small charges. Just go. Run." I looked at my granddaughter. For the first time in 25 years, I saw my blood in her veins. I saw the integrity that her father had lost. I took the card. I grabbed the bank statement and one of the postcards, the one where he wished her a happy 16th birthday. I shoved them into my pocket. "Thank you," I said. "Go," she urged, pushing me toward the back door. "Go before she comes up." I scrambled out the window onto the trellis just as I heard Monica's voice in the hall calling out for Laura. I hit the ground hard, my ankles screaming in protest, but I didn't stop. I ran through the neighbor's hedge and down the alleyway, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't look back. I had the evidence. I had the means. And for the first time in a long time, I had a destination. I was going to Seattle. I was going to introduce myself to William Thorne. I ran until the burning in my lungs eclipsed the pain in my ankles. The alleyways behind my subdivision were a maze of overgrown hedges and rotting fences, but I knew them by heart. I used to walk these paths with Henry, the golden retriever I had 15 years ago, before Monica said he was too messy and sent him away while I was at the dentist. I kept to the shadows, ducking behind a dumpster every time I saw headlights sweep across the adjacent street. I wasn't just running from my house, I was running from a life sentence in a lockdown unit. I made it to the Interstate Transit Center, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and black. It was a grimy concrete island of diesel fumes and desperate people. Perfect cover. I pulled my hat low and approached the automated kiosk. My fingers hovered over the screen. I punched in a destination. Portland first, then Seattle. I didn't want a direct line. I swiped Laura's black credit card. The machine whirred. My breath hitched. Approved. The ticket printed with a rasping sound. I grabbed it, and the card my lifeline, and boarded the first bus heading north. I took a seat in the back near the bathroom where the smell of chemical disinfectant was strong enough to water my eyes, but it was the only place I felt hidden. As the bus rumbled onto the highway, I watched the city limits of my prison fade into the distance. I thought I was safe. I thought I had a head start. I underestimated Monica. 3 hours later, the bus pulled into a rest stop, a brightly lit oasis of fast food and overpriced gasoline. We had a 20-minute layover. I needed coffee. I needed caffeine to keep the old man brain from shutting down. I walked into the store, keeping my head down. I grabbed a large black coffee and a sandwich. I went to the counter and swiped the card. Declined. The cashier, a teenager with acne and a bored expression, sighed. "Try it again, Pops." I swiped again. Declined. My stomach dropped through the floor. Monica had found out. Laura must have cracked, or Monica checked the notifications. She had killed the card. I fumbled in my pockets, pretending to look for cash, knowing I had none. "Hey, look at this," someone shouted from the other side of the store. I looked up. Mounted in the corner above the slushy machine was a television tuned to the local 24-hour news channel. The red banner at the bottom screamed, "Silver Alert." And there above it was my face. It was a photo from 10 years ago, from my retirement party. I looked happy. I looked sane. The anchor's voice cut through the store chatter. "Police are searching for 71-year-old Gerald Dawson. He has been reported missing by his family. Mr. Dawson suffers from advanced dementia and may be disoriented. Police warn that he has a history of violent outbursts and may be a danger to himself and others. Do not approach. Call 911 immediately." Violent. She had played the violence card. She wasn't just looking for a lost relative, she was hunting a fugitive. She had turned the entire state into her personal search party. I felt eyes on me. The cashier looked at the screen, then at me. His eyes narrowed. "Hey, you look kinda like..." I didn't let him finish. I left the coffee. I left the sandwich. I turned and walked out the door, forcing myself not to run. I could feel the heat of their stares on my back. I ducked around the side of the building, avoiding the bus. I couldn't get back on. The driver would have seen the alert by now. I was stranded in a parking lot 80 miles from home with no money, no transport, and a face that was now public enemy number one. I hid behind a stack of wooden pallets near the dumpster, shivering as the night air turned frigid. I had to think. I was a forensic accountant. I solved problems. I found assets where there were none. I looked down at my wrist. The Rolex Submariner. I had bought it for myself in 1998, the year I made partner. It was the only thing of value Monica hadn't managed to strip from me, probably because she thought it was a fake. It was stainless steel, heavy and scratched from years of wear, but the movement inside was Swiss perfection. It was worth $5,000 easily. I peeked around the pallets. Across the street, next to a liquor store with barred windows, was a neon sign that buzzed and flickered. We buy gold. Pawn. It was a risk. A massive risk. Pawnbrokers talk to cops. But I had no choice. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dirty shirt, and walked across the street. The shop smelled of stale smoke and desperation. The man behind the counter was built like a vending machine, thick-necked and bald, with eyes that assessed my worth in seconds. He looked at my disheveled clothes, my wild hair. "Help you," he grunted. I unclasped the watch and laid it on the glass counter. "I need cash." He picked it up, turning it over in his meaty hands. He took out a loop and screwed it into his eye. He looked at the watch, then at me. "Nice piece," he said. "Stolen, it is mine." I said, my voice steady. "I have the papers at home if you need them. But I need cash tonight." My car broke down. He laughed, a wet, hacking sound. "Sure it did. Look, old-timer, I don't care where you got it, but I can't give you market value without papers. Risk tax, how much?" I asked. "400. My jaw tightened. "It is worth 5,000. "400, he repeated, putting the watch down. "Take it or leave it." I looked at the security camera in the corner. I looked at the phone on the wall. He knew I was desperate. He could probably smell the fear on me. 500, I countered. "And you don't log it until tomorrow." He narrowed his eyes, considering. Then he reached into the register and counted out 5 greasy $100 bills. "Deal. Now get out of here before I change my mind." I took the money and walked out, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. I had sold my last link to my successful past for a bus ticket and a disguise. My next stop was the 24-hour pharmacy down the block. I kept my head down, avoiding the cameras. I bought a box of black hair dye, a pair of cheap reading glasses from a rack, and a disposable razor. I paid cash. I found a public restroom in a park a few blocks away. It was filthy, the mirror cracked and stained. Under the flickering fluorescent light, I looked at myself. Jerry Dawson, the victim. The senile old man. I stripped off my shirt and lathered the dye into my white hair and my beard. The chemical smell stung my nose. I waited 10 minutes, shivering in the cold. Then I washed it out in the sink. When I looked up, a stranger looked back. The hair is jet black, too dark, really unnatural, but it changed the architecture of my face. I shaved off the beard I had worn for 40 years, leaving my chin bare. I put on the cheap glasses. Jerry Dawson was gone. In his place was a hard-faced stranger with nothing to lose. I walked back to the bus station, but I didn't go to the ticket counter. I waited outside near the loading docks. I found a driver smoking a cigarette by a bus marked Seattle Express. "You taking cash passengers?" I asked, holding out a $100 bill. The driver looked at the money, then at the half-empty bus. "Machine is broken inside," he said with a wink, taking the bill and pocketing it. "Sit in the back. Keep your head down." I climbed aboard and walked to the last row. As the bus pulled away, merging onto the highway that would take me to the city where my dead son was building skyscrapers, I touched the pocket where I kept the evidence. Monica had declared war. She had branded me a monster. But she had forgotten one thing. Monsters are created, and she had just finished making me one. I closed my eyes and let the rhythm of the road carry me toward the reckoning. Seattle was a city of glass and steel rising from the gray mist, like a monument to ambition. It was raining when the bus hissed to a stop, a cold, relentless drizzle that soaked through my thin jacket the moment I stepped onto the pavement. I had $400 left in my pocket, and a face that was plastered on every news station in Oregon. But here in the shadow of the Space Needle, nobody looked twice at a weary old man with dyed black hair and cheap reading glasses. I wasn't Jerry Dawson anymore. I was just another invisible soul in a city that only saw success. Thorn Tower was impossible to miss. It pierced the skyline, a jagged shard of obsidian reflecting the clouds. The launch gala was tonight. I saw the posters plastered on construction barricades. A black tie event for the elite. The kind of place where a ticket cost more than my house. I didn't need a ticket. I needed a way in that didn't require an invitation. I spent the morning watching the service entrance. I saw the catering trucks, the florists, the cleaning crews. I followed a laundry van to a loading dock 3 blocks away. When the driver went inside to sign a manifest, I saw my chance. A rack of uniforms hung near the open back doors. I grabbed a gray jumpsuit with a generic facility maintenance logo and a plastic ID badge clipped to the pocket. It was stealing, but I reasoned that my son owed me a lot more than the cost of a polyester uniform. I changed in a public restroom, pulling the jumpsuit over my street clothes. It smelled of industrial detergent and someone else's sweat. I found a janitor cart abandoned near the freight elevator of the tower parking garage. I grabbed the handle. I kept my head down. I walked with the slow, shuffling gait of a man who is paid by the hour to be invisible. The security guard at the service elevator didn't even look up from his phone when I muttered maintenance and pushed the cart past him. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was the longest of my life. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, threatening to crack them wide open. When the doors slid apart, the noise hit me first. The clinking of crystal glasses, the hum of expensive conversation, the soft thrum of a string quartet. The ballroom was a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. I pushed my cart along the perimeter, hugging the wall, my eyes scanning the room. And then I saw him. He was standing in the center of a circle of admirers, holding a glass of champagne like a scepter. William Thorne, my son. He looked regal. His suit fit him like a second skin. He threw his head back and laughed at something a woman in a red dress said. It was the same laugh that used to fill our kitchen when I made pancakes on Sunday mornings. The sound of it made my knees weak. I wanted to run to him. I wanted to grab him and shake him. I wanted to scream. But I forced myself to grip the handle of the mop bucket. I waited. I watched him for an hour. I watched him charm investors. I watched him shake hands with the mayor. He was a king in his castle, and I was the ghost haunting the halls. Finally, he handed his empty glass to a waiter and whispered something to his head of security, a mountain of a man with a coil in his ear. The guard nodded and stayed by the door as William walked toward the hallway marked VIP restrooms. This was it. I pushed my cart into the hallway just as he disappeared inside the men room. I parked the cart across the door, blocking it slightly, and hung a wet floor sign on the handle. I took a deep breath. I pushed the door open. The restroom was silent, save for the soft rush of water from a motion sensor faucet. It was marble and gold, opulent enough to be a palace. William was standing at the mirror adjusting his tie. He looked at my reflection as I entered. "We are good in here," he said dismissively, not even turning around. "Come back in 10 minutes. I didn't leave. I locked the door behind me. The click of the latch echoed off the tile. William frowned in the mirror. I said, "Get out." "Can you not hear?" I walked forward until I was standing right behind him. I looked into the mirror, into the eyes of the boy I had raised. "Hello, Brandon," I said. He froze. His hands stopped on his tie. He stared at my reflection. The dyed hair and the glasses threw him for a second. He squinted. Then recognition dawned. It didn't come with fear. It didn't come with shame. It came with a cold annoyance, like he had found a stain on his cuff. He turned around slowly. "You look terrible, Dad," he said. "That hair dye is tragic." I felt the breath leave my lungs. No shock, no apology, just criticism. "You are alive," I whispered, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. "You let us bury you. You let your mother die of a broken heart, thinking you were gone." He sighed, reaching for a paper towel to dry his hands. "Mom had a heart condition, Dad. She was going to die anyway. I just gave her something dramatic to focus on at the end." The callousness of it struck me like a physical blow. I took a step back, steadying myself against a sink. "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do it?" "We loved you. We gave you everything." "You gave me mediocrity," he spat the word out like a curse. "You gave me a small life in a small town with a small future. You wanted me to be like you, an accountant, a nobody. I was suffocating in that house." "So you killed yourself," I said. "You drove your car to the gorge." "I parked my car by the gorge," he corrected. "I took a bus to Seattle, and I took the $2 million life insurance payout that Monica collected. It was my seed money. It was the only useful thing you ever provided for me. The money. It always came back to the money." "Monica knew," I said. "She has been with you this whole time." "Of course she knew," he said, smoothing his lapel. "Monica is a visionary. She saw my potential when you didn't. She stayed behind to handle the logistics, to keep you quiet, to manage the funds until I could get Thorn Enterprises off the ground. She sacrificed a lot for this empire. She tried to put me in a home," I said, my anger finally rising, choking out the sorrow. "She tried to have me committed. She drugged me." "Because you became a liability," he said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "You were supposed to just fade away, Jerry. You were supposed to be the tragic widower who quietly lived out his days in the basement. But you had to start asking questions. You had to start looking at the finances. You became expensive. And now here you are, crashing my IPO launch, looking like a street person." He took a step toward me. He was taller than me now, broader. The boy I knew was gone. This was a predator. "You are a monster," I said. "I am a billionaire," he countered. "And you are a trespassing janitor. Who do you think the world is going to believe?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't call the police. He pressed a speed dial button. "Mike, get in here. We have a situation in the restroom. Some homeless guy got past the perimeter. He is harassing me." He hung up and smiled a cold, shark-like grin. "You should have stayed in the basement, Dad." The food was free. The door burst open. The lock shattered. 2 security guards the size of linebackers filled the room. They saw me standing there in my gray jumpsuit. They saw the billionaire CEO. They didn't need to ask questions. "Get him out of here," William barked, "and teach him a lesson about trespassing. I don't want to see his face near this building again." The first guard grabbed me by the collar of my jumpsuit. He didn't just pull me, he threw me. I slammed against the marble wall, my head cracking against the stone. Stars exploded in my vision. I slid to the floor, gasping for air. "Wait," I wheezed, trying to stand. "He is my son. He is Brandon Dawson." The guard laughed. "Sure, he is, Pops. And I am the Queen of England." He kicked me in the ribs. I felt something snap. The pain was blinding, white-hot, and immediate. I curled into a ball on the cold floor. "Get him up," the second guard said. "The boss wants him in the alley." They hauled me to my feet. My legs were like jelly. William stood, watching, his arms crossed, inspecting his suit for any dust I might have transferred. He looked at me with absolute disgust. "Goodbye, Jerry," he said. "Do us both a favor and die quietly this time." As the guards dragged me past him, I lunged. It was a desperate, flailing movement. I grabbed at his jacket. "Let go of me, you filth!" he shouted, slapping my hand away. The guard slammed me into the doorframe, then dragged me down the service corridor. But in that split second of contact, in that final desperate grasp, I had done the only thing that mattered. My hand had brushed the inside of his jacket hem. My fingers, stiff and clumsy, had pressed the tiny adhesive bug I had bought from the pawnshop connection into the fabric. It was a listening device smaller than a dime. I didn't feel the pain as they dragged me into the freight elevator. I didn't feel the punches they landed in my stomach as we descended. I barely felt the wet pavement when they threw me out into the back alley, into the rain and the garbage. "Stay down, old man," one of them growled. "Next time we break your legs." The heavy steel door slammed shut. I was alone, in the dark. Bleeding, broken, lying in a puddle of dirty water. My ribs screamed with every breath. My face felt swollen. But as I lay there looking up at the rain falling from the black sky, I started to laugh. It was a wet, gurgling sound, but it was laughter. He thought he had won. He thought he had thrown out the trash. But he was walking back into his party wearing a wire. And I was listening. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the receiver unit. The red light was blinking steady and strong. I put the earbud in. The static cleared. I heard the rustle of fabric. I heard footsteps. And then I heard his voice crystal clear. "Sorry about that, gentlemen. Just a minor nuisance. Is everything ready for the transfer?" I closed my eyes and listened. The pain was fuel now. He had broken my body, but he had handed me the weapon to destroy him. And I wasn't going to miss. The motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and despair. But it was the only place in Seattle that would take cash without asking for an ID. I sat on the edge of the mattress, holding a bag of ice against my ribs, listening to the static hiss in my earbud. My body was a map of bruises, a testament to my son's hospitality, but my mind was sharper than it had been in 20 years. The receiver picked up the sound of a car door closing, then the hum of a quiet engine. William was on the move. He dialed a number. I held my breath. "It is done," he said. His voice was calm, businesslike. The old man crashed the party. Security roughed him up and threw him in the alley. I heard Monica's voice on the other end, tinny and small through the device. "Is he dead?" "He might be," William replied. "He took a beating. But we cannot take chances. If he crawls out of that alley, if he finds a way to talk to the press, I need you to call the contractor, the one we used for the union problem last year. Tell him to sweep the alleys within a 5-block radius of the tower. If they find a man fitting Jerry's description, tell them to finish the job. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just rejection anymore. It was a hit. My son wasn't just a fraud, he was ordering my execution while being driven home in a limousine. I took the earbud out. I couldn't stay here. The motel was too close to the tower. If they were sweeping the perimeter, they would check the flophouses first. I needed help. Real help. Not the police who would see a crazy old man with a record of dementia. I needed someone who operated in the shadows, just like William. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small leather address book. It was worn, the pages yellowed. I hadn't opened it since the day Brandon died. I turned to the letter W. There was one number written in blue ink. No name. Just a number, Arthur Wallace. 20 years ago, Arthur was a brilliant lawyer with a gambling problem and a tendency to fudge his trust account ledgers. I was the auditor sent to bury him. I found the discrepancies. I found the stolen money. I had the evidence to send him to federal prison for a decade. But I also found out his wife was dying of cancer, and he was stealing to pay for experimental treatments. I made a choice. I buried the evidence. I fixed the books. I saved his life and his career. He swore to me that day that if I ever needed a lifeline, I just had to pull the string. I walked to the payphone in the motel parking lot. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. Wallace Law. A smooth voice answered. "I need to speak to Arthur," I said. "Mr. Wallace is not available." "May I ask who is calling?" "Tell him it is the auditor," I said. "Tell him the ledger is open." There was a pause, a click, then a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. "Jerry, is that you? You are supposed to be a ghost. I need to cash in the chip, Arthur. Tonight." He didn't ask questions. He gave me an address in the old historic district. A penthouse. Getting there was a nightmare. I moved through the back streets, avoiding main roads, hiding every time I saw headlights. The pain in my ribs was a constant screaming companion. When I finally reached the building, the doorman didn't want to let me in. I looked like a vagrant. But one call upstairs and the heavy iron gates swung open. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. It was a space filled with dark wood leather and the smell of expensive scotch. Arthur Wallace sat in a wingback chair by the fireplace. He was older now, his hair white, his face lined, but his eyes were as sharp as razor blades. He leaned on a cane with a silver handle. He looked me up and down, taking in the dyed hair, the cheap clothes, the bruises on my face. "You look like hell, Jerry," he said, not rising. "I feel worse," I replied, limping into the room. He poured a glass of amber liquid and held it out. I took it. My hand shook as I drank. The alcohol burned pleasantly, warming the cold that had settled in my bones. "I heard you lost your mind," Arthur said, watching me closely. "The news alerts are everywhere. Dangerous, senile, missing." "I am not senile," I said, dropping into the chair opposite him. "And the only thing I am dangerous to is the lie my son built." "Your son died 25 years ago, Jerry. I went to the funeral. I sent flowers. He didn't die. He ran. He took the insurance money and reinvented himself. He is William Thorne Arthur, the billionaire." Arthur went still. He set his glass down very carefully. "William Thorne is your boy." I nodded. I told him everything. The soup, the news broadcast, the scar, the confrontation in the restroom, the order to have me killed. When I finished, Arthur was silent for a long time. He stared into the fire, his expression unreadable. "So," he said finally, "the saintly Jerry Dawson, the man who never bent a rule except once, has raised a viper. He tried to kill me, Arthur. He beat me and threw me in the trash. And now he has hitmen scouring the city for me. I have nothing. No money, no identity, no home." "What do you want?" Arthur asked. "Do you want safety? I can get you a new name. I can send you to a beach in Mexico where they will never find you." I looked at him. I thought about the beach. I thought about peace or mauves. Then I thought about Laura holding those postcards. I thought about the look of disgust on William's face. "No," I said. "I don't want to hide. I want to burn it down. I want him to lose everything. The money, the name, the reputation. I want him to feel as helpless as I did in that alley." Arthur smiled. It was a terrifying smile, a baring of teeth that belonged to a wolf. "Good," he said. "I was hoping you would say that. Because William Thorne has been a thorn in my side for years. He is arrogant. He is reckless. And he thinks he is untouchable." He stood up, leaning on his cane. "You saved me when I was drowning, Jerry. You gave me a second life. I used it to become very rich and very powerful. And I did it by knowing where all the bodies are buried in this city." He walked to a desk and pressed a button. A wall panel slid open, revealing a bank of monitors and servers. "If we are going to do this, we do it my way," Arthur said. "We don't just go to the police. The police can be bought. Thorne owns half the precinct. We go for the jugular. We go for the money." He turned to me, his eyes gleaming. "You are a forensic accountant, Jerry. You know how to track the flow. I am a lawyer who knows how to bend the law until it snaps. Together we are going to perform a surgery. We are going to dissect William Thorne live on stage. He handed me a tablet. Thorne is going public in 3 days. The IPO is projected to be the biggest in state history. If he launches, he becomes a multi-billionaire. But right now, he is vulnerable. He is leveraging everything to pump up the valuation. I looked at the screen. It was a list of shell companies, offshore accounts, shadow investors. I need access, I said. I need to see the books. You will get them, Arthur promised. But first we need to get you cleaned up. You can't destroy an empire looking like a hobo. He rang a bell. A man in a dark suit appeared from the shadows of the hallway. Thomas, get Mr. Dawson a doctor. Then get him a tailor. And get the guest room ready. The war starts at breakfast. I leaned back in the chair, feeling the first flicker of hope I had felt in days. I wasn't alone anymore. I had a wolf on my side. And my son, the great William Thorne, had no idea that the 2 men who knew the most about hiding dirty secrets were coming for him. I touched the bug in my pocket. I am listening, Brandon, I whispered. And soon everyone else will be too. The morning sun did not bring warmth to Seattle. It brought chaos. Arthur Wallace sat in his leather armchair, a cup of tea in one hand and a phone in the other. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply whispered. He called a journalist at the Financial Times. He called a contact at the Securities and Exchange Commission. He called a hedge fund manager who panicked at the sound of his own shadow. It is just a rumor, Arthur said, his voice smooth as silk. But I hear the feds are looking into the Thorne acquisition of that shell company in Panama. Money laundering. Massive scale. I wouldn't want to be holding that stock when the subpoena drops. He hung up and smiled at me. The match is lit, Jerry. Now we watch it burn. By noon, the rumor had mutated into a headline. Thorne Enterprises under federal scrutiny. Allegations of money laundering rock tech giant ahead of IPO. The news channels were running it on a loop. I watched from the guest bedroom of Arthur's penthouse as the stock ticker at the bottom of the screen turned red. Thorne Enterprises was bleeding. The stock price, which had been climbing steadily in anticipation of the public offering, began to freefall. Investors were spooked. The board of directors was demanding answers. It was a beautiful thing to witness. For 25 years, my son had built a castle on a foundation of lies, and now I was watching the sand shift beneath his feet. He will panic, Arthur said, walking into the room. He is arrogant, but he is not stupid. He knows his books are dirty. He knows that if the SEC digs deep enough, they will find the holes. He needs to protect the asset. What will he do, I asked. He will move the money, Arthur replied. The liquid capital. The $200 million he has stashed for a rainy day. He will try to hide it offshore where he thinks no one can touch it. And when he moves it, we will be waiting. At 7 o'clock that evening, we were parked in an unmarked van across the street from a restaurant called The Cellar. It was an exclusive place, the kind with no sign on the door and a 6-month waiting list. But Arthur knew the owner. He knew everyone. He had arranged for table 4 in the back corner to be available, and he had arranged for the flower centerpiece to contain a high-fidelity microphone. I sat in the back of the van, wearing a headset, my eyes glued to the video feed from a camera Arthur had bribed a busboy to clip onto a menu stand. The image was grainy, but I could see them clearly. Monica arrived first. She looked like a woman on the verge of a breakdown. Her hair was pulled back too tight, her makeup unable to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She ordered a double vodka martini and drank half of it in one swallow. She kept checking her phone, her fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the tablecloth. 10 minutes later, William arrived. He entered through the kitchen door, avoiding the paparazzi that had started to gather out front. He looked furious. His face was flushed and he was sweating. He sat down opposite Monica without a greeting. "You look like a wreck," he hissed. "Pull yourself together." Monica slammed her glass down. "Pull myself together." Have you seen the news, William? The stock is tanking. They are saying the FBI is involved. Is it true? Are they investigating us? Keep your voice down, he snapped, looking around the empty room. It is a smear campaign. Someone is trying to tank the IPO. It is probably a competitor. Or it is your father, Monica whispered. William laughed, a harsh barking sound. My father is a senile old man who got beat up in an alley. He is probably dead in a ditch somewhere. This is corporate warfare, Monica. It is sophisticated. It is calculated. I listened, feeling a cold satisfaction. He still underestimated me. He still thought I was nothing. That was his fatal flaw. The waiter approached. William waved him away. We need to secure the fund, he said, leaning in close. If the SEC freezes our domestic accounts, we are finished. The IPO will be halted. We need liquidity to pay off the lenders and keep the lights on until this blows over. You want to move the Cayman money? Monica asked, her eyes widening. All of it, William confirmed. 200 million. Tonight. It is risky, William. Moving that much cash triggers alerts. Not if we do it through the blind trust, he said. The one we set up in 2010. The Sentinel Trust. It is insulated. We move the money there, then wire it to the new accounts in Switzerland. It will be clean. I looked at Arthur. He was smiling that wolfish smile again. Sentinel Trust, he whispered. I set that up for him. And I kept the master administrative codes. On the screen, William pulled out a tablet. He opened a secure banking app. I am initiating the transfer now, he said. I need your authorization code, Monica. You are the CO signatory. Monica hesitated. Are you sure this is the right move? Do you want to go to prison? William asked, his voice dripping with venom. Because if they freeze those assets and start auditing the source, we are both going to jail for a very long time. Give me the code. Monica fumbled in her purse. She pulled out a small digital token. She pressed the button. 492765, she read. William typed it in. Then he pressed his thumb against the screen. Done, he said, exhaling a long breath. The money is moving. By tomorrow morning it will be in Zurich. Untouchable. He leaned back in his chair, looking smug. Let them investigate. Let the stock drop. We have the war chest. We can buy back the company for pennies on the dollar once the panic settles. We win, Monica. We always win. I took off the headset. My hands were shaking not from fear, but from adrenaline. Did you get it? I asked Arthur. Arthur was already typing furiously on his laptop, which was hardwired into the van's satellite connection. I got it, he said. Sentinel Trust. I am in the back end now. I see the pending transaction. $200 million. He looked at me, his eyes bright in the gloom of the van. They think it is going to Switzerland, Jerry. But I can redirect it. I can change the routing number before the clearinghouse processes the batch at midnight. Where do we send it? I asked. Arthur paused, his fingers hovering over the keys. We could keep it, he said softly. $200 million. We could disappear. We could live like kings. I looked at the screen. I saw my son, the man who had ordered my death, drinking a toast to his own cleverness. I saw the woman who had tried to erase my mind. I thought about the cold soup in the basement. I thought about the years of grief. No, I said. I don't want his money. It is blood money. I want him to know it is gone. I want him to watch it vanish. Arthur nodded slowly. Then where? The children's hospital, I said. The one in Seattle. The one that treats kids who don't have insurance. Kids who get stitched up by their fathers because they cannot afford a doctor. Arthur smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. A charitable donation, he said. Anonymous, of course. Of course, I agreed. He typed in a series of commands. He bypassed the Swiss routing. He entered the donation portal for the hospital foundation. He entered the amount. $200 million. Click. It is done, Arthur said. The money is in escrow. At midnight it hits the hospital account. And 5 minutes later William gets the notification. On the screen I saw William check his watch. He signaled for the check. We should go to the gala, he said to Monica. We need to show our faces. Show them we are not afraid. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. He looked powerful. He looked invincible. He had no idea that he was already a pauper. He is walking into his own funeral, I whispered. Arthur closed the laptop. Let us go get dressed, Jerry. You have a gala to crash. And this time, you are walking in through the front door. We stepped out of the van into the cool night air. The rain had stopped. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The fear was gone. The grief was gone. There was only the cold, hard certainty of the end. My son had set a trap for me 25 years ago. Tonight, I had just sprung mine, and when the steel jaws snapped shut, he wouldn't even see it coming. The rain in Seattle does not wash things clean, it just makes the grime slicker. I stood under the awning of a coffee shop in Pioneer Square watching the passers-by. My dyed hair was starting to itch, and the bruises on my ribs throbbed in time with the bass from a passing car, but I stood tall. I was not the man who hid in a basement anymore. I was a man who had stolen $200 million, and I was about to turn my own granddaughter into an accomplice. Arthur had set up the meeting. He had sent a courier to the hospital where Laura worked with a note that simply said, "The truth is in the basement." She would know what it meant. She would remember the safe. She arrived 10 minutes late, looking over her shoulder. She wore a raincoat and a look of terrified exhaustion. She didn't hug me. She stood 3 feet away, her hands deep in her pockets, as if she were afraid I might be contagious. "Grandpa?" She whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Mom says you are sick. She says you attacked a security guard. She says the police are looking for you because you are a danger to yourself." I looked at her. I saw the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to believe her mother because believing her mother was safe. Believing me meant her entire world was a lie. "Your mother says a lot of things, Laura," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "She said your father was dead. She said I was senile. She said she loved us." Laura flinched. "That is different, Dad." "William." He explained it to me. He said he had to leave to protect us. He said he was in trouble with bad people back then, and faking his death was the only way to keep us safe. I almost laughed. It was such a predictable lie, a romantic hero narrative to cover up a cowardly greed. He lied, Laura. He left because he wanted the insurance money. He left because he didn't want to be a father or a son anymore. He wanted to be a king, and kings do not have baggage. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Arthur had compiled it that morning. It was the nail in the coffin. "You think I am the crazy one?" I said, holding it out. "You think I am the one who needs to be locked away? Read this." She hesitated. "Read it," I commanded softly. She took the envelope. Her fingers were trembling. She pulled out the documents. The first one was a photocopy of an admission form for Sunny Meadows long-term care facility. It was dated 3 months ago. "Look at the date," I said. She stared at it. 3 months ago, but Mom said she only decided to move you last week, after you started hallucinating. She signed the contract 90 days ago, Laura. She paid the deposit. It wasn't a reaction to my health. It was a scheduled eviction. She was just waiting for the right time to pull the trigger. Laura flipped the page. It was a copy of a petition for conservatorship. It listed Monica Dawson as the sole guardian of my estate, and below that was a draft of a property sale agreement. My house, my land. She was selling the house, she whispered. She was liquidating me, I corrected. But keep reading. The last page is the most important. It was a trust fund amendment. The William Thorne Family Trust. It detailed the distribution of assets upon the event of an IPO. Laura read it. Her eyes went wide. She read it again. I am not in it, she said, her voice shaking. My name isn't here. No, I said. It isn't. The beneficiaries are William Thorne and Monica Dawson. There is no provision for children. There is no college fund. There is no inheritance. But Mom said, she told me that once the company went public, we would all be set for life. She said I could quit the hospital. She said I could buy a house. She lied, I said brutally. You are not a beneficiary, Laura. You are an expense, just like me. Just like Richard was before your father pushed him. She looked up at me. Tears were mixing with the rain on her cheeks. Richard, she asked. Who is Richard? Your uncle, I said. The one they never told you about. The one your father killed to get the first down payment on his new life. I told her the story. The gorge, the argument, the push. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just gave her the cold, hard facts that Henry had given me on the mountain. They are monsters, Laura. They use people. They used me. They used your grandmother. And now they are using you. She dropped the papers. They scattered on the wet pavement, soaking up the grime. She put her hands over her face and sobbed. It was a sound of pure heartbreak, the sound of a child realizing that the monsters under the bed were actually sleeping in the master bedroom. Why, she choked out. Why are you telling me this? Because I am going to stop them, I said. I am going to take everything from them. The money, the reputation, the freedom. I am going to burn Thorne Enterprises to the ground. She looked at me terrified. You cannot. They are too powerful. Dad has security. Mom has lawyers. I have the truth, I said. And I have you. Me, she shook her head, backing away. I cannot. I cannot go against them, Grandpa. If I do... Mom said if I helped you, we would be on the street. She said you would ruin us. We are already ruined, Laura. The only choice now is whether you want to be a victim or a survivor. I stepped closer, invading her space, holding her gaze. I need you to do one thing. Just one thing. And then you can walk away. You can go back to your life and pretend this never happened. What she whispered. I pulled a small black USB drive from my pocket. It was a keylogger program Arthur's tech guy had loaded. Military grade. Invisible. Tonight is the gala. Your mother will be there. She will be glued to her phone checking the accounts managing the transfer of the funds they think they successfully stole. I need you to plug this into her phone. Just for 30 seconds. Tell her you need to charge it. Tell her you need to make a call. I don't care. Just get it connected. Why, she asked, staring at the black plastic. Because I need the authentication codes, I lied. I didn't tell her the money was already gone. I didn't tell her that the keylogger was actually to access the cloud backup where your father keeps the security footage from 25 years ago. The footage Arthur found traces of but couldn't decrypt without a direct link to the primary device. The footage of the accident. If I get those codes, I can prove the fraud, I said. I can prove they stole from me. And I can put them in jail. She looked at the drive. She looked at the papers dissolving in the rain. She looked at the memory of a father she never knew, and a mother who viewed her as a budget cut. She took the drive. Her hand was cold, but her grip was firm. 30 seconds, she said. That is all I need. She put the drive in her pocket. She wiped her face, smearing her mascara. She looked like a warrior who had just survived her first battle. "Mom is wearing a red dress tonight," she said, her voice flat. "She bought it with the money she got from selling your car." I nodded, feeling a fresh spike of anger. Of course she did. "I will do it," Laura said. "Not for the money, not for the house, but because she looked me in the eye yesterday and told me you didn't love me. She told me you forgot my name." I reached out and took her hand. "I never forgot you, Laura. You were the only thing that kept me sane in that basement." She squeezed my hand, then let go. She turned and walked away into the rain, heading back toward the life that was about to implode. I watched her go. I felt a heavy weight in my chest. I had just weaponized my granddaughter. I had turned her into a spy against her own parents. It was a terrible thing to do, but as I picked up the soggy admission form for Sunny Meadows and crumpled it in my fist, I knew it was necessary. War is not clean. And tonight at the gala, the streets of Seattle were going to run red with the truth. I pulled up my collar and headed back to the penthouse. It was time to put on my tuxedo. The tuxedo Arthur Wallace had commissioned for me fit like a suit of armor. It was midnight blue bespoke silk, and it cost more than the car Monica had sold to buy her red dress. I stood in the shadows of the mezzanine overlooking the grand ballroom of the Thorn Tower, adjusting my cufflinks. They were gold engraved with my initials. G.D. Gerald Dawson. A name my son had tried to bury under 20 feet of concrete and 25 years of lies. Tonight I was resurrecting it. Below me the gala was in full swing. It was a disgusting display of wealth. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, dripping light onto the heads of Seattle's elite. There were ice sculptures shaped like the tower fountains flowing with vintage champagne and tables laden with caviar and truffles. 500 people were down there celebrating a man who had murdered his brother and tried to murder his parents. They clapped, they toasted, they fawned over him. William Thorne stood on the raised stage bathed in a spotlight that made him look like a god. He was holding a microphone, his other hand resting possessively on Monica's waist. She was wearing the red dress, just as Laura had said. It was a vibrant blood-red strapless and tight cut to show off the body she maintained with my money. She was smiling that practiced, radiant smile, waving to the investors and politicians who had made them untouchable. I tapped the earpiece hidden in my ear canal. "Are we ready, Arthur?" Arthur's voice came back clear and steady from the control van parked 3 blocks away. "We are green, Jerry." The keylogger Laura installed gave us the back door to his private cloud server. You were right. He kept it. He kept a digital copy of the security footage from the gas station near the gorge, a trophy, a reminder of how smart he thinks he is. We have bypassed the ballroom AV system. We own the screens. We own the audio. Just say the word. I looked down at my son. He was raising a glass for a toast. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice booming through the state-of-the-art sound system. "Tonight isn't just about a building. It is about a legacy. It is about rising from nothing. When I came to this city 25 years ago, I had nothing but a dream and the change in my pocket. I left a difficult past behind. I lost family. But I learned that you cannot let the past define you. You have to bury it and build something new on top of it." The crowd murmured their approval. He was so good at it. The humble billionaire, the survivor. He turned to Monica. "And I couldn't have done it without my partner. Monica, you have been my rock. You believed in me when no one else did." He kissed her. A flash of cameras erupted like a strobe light. It was the perfect picture of the American dream. Now I whispered, "Burn it down." The lights in the ballroom flickered. Once, twice. Then they died completely, plunging the room into darkness. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by nervous laughter. William's voice cut through the dark, annoyed but controlled. Just a minor technical glitch, folks. We have too much power running to the stage. Give us a second. But the lights didn't come back on. Instead, the massive LED screen behind the stage, the one that had been displaying the soaring stock charts of Thorne Enterprises, flickered to life. It didn't show a graph. It didn't show the logo. It showed a timestamp. October 14th, 1999. 11:42 p.m. The video was grainy black and white footage from an old security camera, but the image was unmistakable. It showed the edge of a familiar gorge, a lover's lane spot near our old town. A car pulled into the frame. My car. The sedan that police had told me went off the road. The car stopped. The driver door opened. A young man stepped out. Even in the grain, the way he moved was familiar. It was Brandon. He was 25 years younger, but it was him. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. A woman got out. Monica. A hush fell over the ballroom, the kind of silence that feels heavy like the air before a tornado. On the screen, young Brandon and young Monica walked to the back of the car. They didn't look sad. They didn't look like people in the middle of a tragedy. They were laughing. Monica lit a cigarette. Brandon leaned against the trunk and kissed her. Then they got to work. They put the car in neutral. They positioned themselves behind the bumper. And they pushed. The car rolled slowly toward the edge of the ravine. As it tipped over the ledge, disappearing into the darkness below, Brandon threw his hands in the air in a gesture of victory. He hugged Monica, spinning her around. Then they turned and walked away, hand in hand, disappearing into the night. The video froze on that final frame, the timestamp blinking. For 10 seconds, nobody breathed. The cognitive dissonance in the room was palpable. They were looking at the man on stage, the titan of industry, and they were looking at the boy on the screen, committing insurance fraud and faking his own death. Then the murmurs started, a low rumble that grew into a roar. "What is this?" William shouted, his voice cracking. "Turn it off! Cut the feed! Security!" He waved frantically at the sound booth at the back of the room. But the technicians were helpless. Arthur had locked them out. The screen remained frozen, a giant glowing accusation. Monica pulled away from him, stepping back, her hands covering her mouth. She looked at the screen, then at the crowd, her eyes wide with terror. She knew exactly what that video meant. It meant the statute of limitations might be up for the fraud, but the public court of opinion had no expiration date. "It is a deep fake," William screamed into the microphone, his composure shattering. "It is AI generated. Someone is hacking us. This is corporate sabotage. Don't believe what you are seeing." He was desperate, sweating under the emergency lights that had just kicked on. He looked like a trapped animal. "Arthur," I said. "Cut his mic." The sound of William shouting suddenly vanished. He was mouthing words, screaming into the dead microphone, but no sound came out. He tapped it furiously. He looked around, wild-eyed. Then I spoke. I was wearing a headset microphone synced to the ballroom SPA system. My voice, deep and gravelly, boomed from every speaker in the room, drowning out the confusion. "It is not a deepfake, Brandon." The sound of my voice hit him like a physical blow. He froze. He stopped tapping the mic. He looked up, scanning the darkness of the balcony, scanning the crowd. He knew that voice. It was the voice that had read him bedtime stories. The voice that had taught him to ride a bike. "Who is that?" he screamed, his voice thin without amplification. "Who is doing this?" I walked out of the shadows of the mezzanine and started down the grand staircase. The spotlight operator, confused and following instinct, swung the light from the stage to me. I was illuminated in a circle of white light. The tuxedo, the black hair, the face of a man who had come back from the dead. "Hello, son," I said, my voice echoing through the hall. The crowd turned. 500 heads swiveled to look at me. The path from the stairs to the stage cleared instantly. People backed away, creating a wide aisle lined with shocked faces. I walked slowly. I didn't limp. I ignored the pain in my ribs. I walked with the authority of a judge entering his courtroom. William stared at me. His face went pale, pasty white. He looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Jerry," he whispered. The word was not amplified, but in the silent room it was loud enough. I reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped onto the main floor. I kept walking, my eyes locked on his. "You missed a spot, Brandon," I said, my voice booming. "You thought you buried the past. You thought you threw me away in that alley like a bag of garbage. But you forgot one thing. Garbage doesn't have a memory. A father does." Monica let out a sob. "It is him," she shrieked. "Oh my God, William, it is him!" She grabbed William's arm, digging her nails into his expensive suit. "Do something. Get him out of here." William shook her off. He was trembling. His eyes darted around the room looking for his security team, looking for an exit, looking for a way to spin this. But there was no spin. The video was still frozen behind him. The resemblance between the boy on the screen and the man on stage was undeniable. And the resemblance between the man on stage and the old man walking toward him was undeniable. "Security!" William roared, finding his voice again. "Get this man out of here. He is mentally unstable. He is a stalker." The two guards from the alley, the same ones who had broken my ribs, started to move toward me from the side of the stage. They looked uncertain. This wasn't a homeless man in a jumpsuit anymore. This was a man in a tuxedo commanding the room. "I wouldn't do that, gentlemen," I said calmly, not breaking stride. As the guards stepped onto the floor, the main doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. "Federal agents. Nobody move." A dozen agents in FBI windbreakers swarmed into the room, guns drawn. They fanned out, securing the exits, blocking the stage. The crowd screamed and scattered. The security guards froze, putting their hands up. I didn't stop walking. I walked right up to the edge of the stage. I was 5 feet away from my son. I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. I could see the terror in his eyes. "You told them I was dead," I said. "You told them I was senile. You told them I was dangerous." I climbed the stairs to the stage. William backed away until he hit the podium. Monica was cowering behind him, weeping into her hands. "But here I am," I said, standing next to him. "I am alive. I am sane. And I am the most dangerous thing you have ever met, because I know who you really are." I turned to the crowd. The FBI agents were holding their positions, letting this play out. Arthur had arranged that too. He had given them the bigger fish, the money laundering evidence, on the condition that I got my moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into my headset, "the man you know as William Thorne does not exist. He is a fiction, a ghost story invented by a coward who killed his own brother and abandoned his parents for an insurance check." Murmurs of shock rippled through the room. "His name is Brandon Dawson," I continued, "and 25 years ago he pushed his brother Richard off a cliff because he wanted more. And 3 days ago he tried to do the same to me." "Lies," William screamed, lunging at me. "It is all lies. He is crazy." He grabbed for my throat. But he was slow and desperate. I didn't even have to hit him. I just stepped aside. He stumbled, crashing into the podium. The FBI agents moved in. "Brandon Dawson, put your hands behind your back." William scrambled up, looking wild. "My name is William Thorne. I am a billionaire. You cannot touch me. I have lawyers. I have money." I looked at him. I smiled a cold, hard smile. "About that money," I said. I pointed to the screen. The image of the car disappeared. It was replaced by a bank transaction log. It showed a transfer. "Sentinel Trust to Seattle Children's Hospital. Amount $200 million. Status completed. William stared at the screen. He blinked. He read it again. "What is this?" he whispered. "Where is my money? It is gone," I said. "I donated it. In memory of Richard Dawson." "No," he wailed. "No, no, no. That is my money. That is everything. It was never yours," I said. "It was stolen, and now it is doing some good." He fell to his knees. He looked at his hands, then at me. The arrogance was gone. The king was dead. All that was left was a greedy little boy who had lost his toy. Monica screamed a high, piercing sound as an agent cuffed her wrists. "You did this," she spat at me as they dragged her past. "You ruined everything." "I didn't ruin anything, Monica," I said. I just turned on the lights. William looked up at me as they pulled him to his feet. Tears were streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. "Dad," he pleaded. "Dad, please. Tell them. Tell them it is a mistake. I am your son." I looked at him. I looked at the scar on his chin, the one I had stitched with my own hands. I felt a pang of grief for the boy he used to be, but it was quickly buried by the memory of the cold soup, the basement, and the order to kill me. "My son died 25 years ago," I said, my voice flat. "You are just a stranger with his face." The agents hauled him away. The crowd watched in stunned silence. I stood alone on the stage under the spotlight. I took the earpiece out. I took a deep breath. My ribs hurt, but for the first time in a very long time I could breathe. The silence in the ballroom was broken by a sound that made my skin crawl. It was laughter. A dry, hacking laugh that started low in William's throat and grew until it echoed off the vaulted ceiling. He pulled himself up from the floor, wiping the blood from his lip with a silk handkerchief that cost more than my monthly pension. He straightened his jacket, pushed his hair back, and looked at the crowd with a manic gleam in his eyes. He pointed a shaking finger at the frozen image of the young man pushing the car off the cliff. "Is that it?" he sneered, his voice regaining some of its old arrogance. "Is that your smoking gun, Jerry? A grainy tape from 1999. You are pathetic. You really are just a senile old man who does not understand how the world works." He turned to the FBI agents who were holding their position by the stage. "Officers, do you know what the statute of limitations is for insurance fraud in this state? It is 7 years. Do you know what the statute is for wrongful death or manslaughter when there is no body and no forensic evidence? It is complicated, but after 25 years, good luck getting a jury to convict a billionaire pillar of the community based on a blurry videotape found on a hacked server." He walked to the edge of the stage, spreading his arms wide, addressing the room like a preacher. "This is history," he shouted. "Ancient history. Even if that is me on that screen, and I am not saying it is, you cannot touch me. I am William Thorne. I built this city. I employ half the people in this room. You think a ghost story is going to bring me down?" He turned back to me, his eyes full of hate. "You missed your window, Dad. You should have stayed dead. You cannot prosecute me. I am untouchable." Monica stood up, brushing off her dress. She saw the confidence returning to her husband, and she latched onto it like a lifeline. She pointed at me. "He is right," she shrieked. "This is slander. We are going to sue you for everything. We are going to bury you in legal fees until you die in that gutter you crawled out of." For a moment, the crowd wavered. I could see the doubt creeping into their faces. Money has a gravity of its own. People want to be near it. They want to believe that the man who signs the checks is invincible. William saw it too. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has just bluffed his way out of a hanging. "You are right, Brandon," I said, my voice calm, amplified by the speakers. "The statute of limitations on the fraud has expired. You might even beat the murder charge with a high-priced legal team. You are very good at manipulating the law." I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo. William flinched, thinking I was reaching for a weapon. But I only pulled out a thin tablet. "But I am not a lawyer," I said. I am a forensic accountant, and while the law has time limits, money does not. Money leaves a trail. It leaves footprints in the snow, and you left a very muddy path. I tapped the screen of the tablet. The image on the massive wall behind me changed. The video of the car crash vanished. In its place, a complex diagram appeared. It looked like a spider web of lines and boxes. At the center was a black box labeled Sentinel Trust. William stopped smiling. He squinted at the screen. "You thought you were clever using the Sentinel Trust to wash your money," I said, walking closer to him. "A blind trust registered in the Cook Islands with no named beneficiaries, only a bearer bond structure. It is the perfect vehicle for money laundering. You move the cash in, you move it out, and nobody knows who owns it. That is private financial data." William stammered. "That is illegal to show." "It would be illegal," I interrupted, "if I didn't own it." The room went deadly silent. William looked at me, his face twisting in confusion. "What are you talking about?" he whispered. "You made a mistake, son," I said. "A technical error. When you set up the Sentinel Trust 20 years ago, you used a shell company as the trustee to add another layer of anonymity, a company called Blue Horizon Holdings. You forgot to pay the renewal fees on the business registration 3 months ago. It went dormant." I took a step forward, enjoying the way he shrank back. "My friend Arthur Wallace found that dormant registration yesterday morning. He bought the shell company for $500. And because I now own the company that acts as the trustee for your trust fund, I legally have full administrative access to every asset held within it." I swiped the tablet screen again. A bank statement appeared. It was the account in the Cayman Islands, the one he had just transferred his war chest into. The balance shone in bright green numbers, $200 million. "You tried to move your liquid assets tonight," I said. "You thought you were hiding them in a Swiss vault. But because I control the trustee, I control the routing. You didn't send that money to yourself, Brandon. You sent it to me." "No," he gasped. "That is impossible. You cannot do that." "Ooh, I just did," I said. I tapped the screen one more time. A transfer authorization window popped up. It was massive, projected 20 feet high for everyone to see. "Sender Sentinel Trust, recipient Seattle Children's Hospital Foundation, amount $200 million. Memo in memory of the man you used to be." William lunged for me. He screamed a sound of pure animalistic loss. He didn't care about the murder charge. He didn't care about the fraud. But this was his money. This was his God. "Don't you do it!" he roared, clawing at the air. I pressed the button. "Execute!" On the big screen, a loading bar appeared. It filled in less than a second. A green checkmark flashed. "Transfer complete." A collective gasp went through the room. $200 million had just vaporized from the accounts of William Thorne. "Your phone, Brandon," I said. "Check your phone." He fumbled in his pocket. His hands shaking so badly, he dropped the device twice. He picked it up. He stared at the screen. The notification was there. The balance alert. 0. "It is gone," he whispered. "It is all gone." "Not just that," I said relentlessly. "I am not done. Since I own the trustee company, I also have access to the liability clauses. Did you know that the Sentinel Trust has a clawback provision for debt coverage?" I swiped the tablet again. A list of his creditors appeared. The banks that financed the tower. The private lenders. The construction unions. I just triggered the default clauses, I said. "Every loan you have is now due immediately. The tower isn't yours anymore. The penthouse isn't yours. The car waiting outside isn't yours. Even the suit on your back is technically property of the creditors now." Monica fell to her knees. She grabbed the hem of my trousers. "Jerry, please," she sobbed. "We have nothing. We will be on the street. You cannot leave us with nothing. You left me with cold soup and a basement. Monica, I said, looking down at her without pity. You left me with a cut phone line and a bottle of pills. You wanted me to have nothing. I am just returning the favor. William was staring at his phone, tapping the screen frantically, as if he could undo the math. I am William Thorne, he mumbled. I am a billionaire. This is a glitch. This is a mistake. There is no William Thorne, I said. He was a fiction bought with stolen money. And now the check has bounced. The FBI agent in charge stepped forward. He had waited for this. He had let me strip the armor off the king before he moved in for the kill. Brandon Dawson, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and the murder of Richard Dawson. Monica Dawson, you are under arrest for conspiracy and insurance fraud. Agents moved in, grabbing William by the arms. He didn't fight. He went limp. His eyes were vacant, fixed on the screen where his balance read 0. He looked small. Without the money, without the arrogance, he was just a middle-aged man who had wasted his life running from himself. Wait, he said as they handcuffed him. Wait. Dad. He looked at me. It was the first time he had looked at me with anything other than contempt in 25 years. Dad, fix it. You can fix it. You are an accountant. You can undo the transfer. Please, I will give you anything. I will give you the house. I will give you a room upstairs. Just get the money back. I looked at him. I saw the 10-year-old boy who cried when he fell off his bike, but that boy was gone. The thing standing in front of me was a hollow shell. I cannot fix you, Brandon, I said, my voice breaking. I spent 25 years mourning you. I cried for you every day. I wished I had been a better father. I wished I had given you more. But I realize now that nothing I gave you would have ever been enough. You have a hole inside you that no amount of money can fill. I turned my back on him. Take him away, I said to the agents. No, Monica screamed as they dragged her off the stage. She kicked and spat, her red dress bunching up around her legs. You old fool. You ruined us. I hope you die alone. I watched them go. I watched them get dragged through the crowd of people who had cheered for them an hour ago. No one moved to help them. No one offered a lawyer. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, recoiling from the stench of failure. I stood alone on the stage. The screen behind me still showed the 0 balance. The room was silent save for the murmurs of shock. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned. It was Arthur Wallace. He had come up from the control van. He was smiling, but his eyes were sad. It is done, Jerry, he said quietly. They are gone. I looked at my hands. They were steady now. The trembling had stopped. Is it over? I asked. Arthur nodded. The money is with the hospital. The evidence is with the FBI. The tower will go into receivership by morning. They have nothing left to fight with. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Laura standing near the exit. She was crying, but she was standing tall. She nodded to me, a silent acknowledgement. We had survived. I took the microphone off my head and laid it on the podium. Let's go, Arthur, I said. I want a hamburger, a real one with salt. We walked off the stage, leaving the empty shell of William Thorne's empire behind us. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past was finally buried, and this time it would stay dead. The silence in the ballroom was broken by the sound of sirens wailing in the distance, getting closer with every heartbeat. But the real storm was already inside. I stood on the stage, the digital receipt of the $200 million donation still glowing on the massive screen behind me like a tombstone for Thorne Enterprises. The 0 balance on William's phone was not just a number. It was the end of his world. The doors at the back of the room burst open again. This time it wasn't a single voice. It was a raid. Federal agents in tactical gear poured in, moving with the heavy precision of a sledgehammer. They didn't care about the champagne or the caviar. They fanned out, securing the perimeter their eyes locked on the man kneeling on the stage. "FBI, nobody move." The command echoed off the crystal chandeliers. The crowd, the elite of Seattle, who had been sipping champagne minutes ago, scattered like roaches when the lights come on. They pressed against the walls, desperate to distance themselves from the radioactive fallout of William Thorne. Brandon didn't run. He couldn't. He was still staring at his phone, his brain unable to process the magnitude of the loss. He was catatonic, frozen in the wreckage of his own greed. But Monica was not catatonic. She was vibrating. The shock of the empty bank account had worn off, replaced by a primal animalistic panic. She looked at Brandon, the man she had conspired with, the man she had lied, for the man she had sold her soul to. She saw him kneeling there, broken and penniless, and something inside her snapped. The facade of the devoted wife, the elegant partner, shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. "You promised me," she screamed. It was a sound so raw it made the agents pause. She lunged at him. She didn't look like a socialite in a red dress anymore. She looked like a fury. She tackled him, her nails raking down his face, aiming for his eyes. "You told me it was safe. You told me he was nothing. You lost it all." She was clawing at him, hitting him, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. It was ugly. It was the sound of rats eating each other on a sinking ship. Brandon tried to shield his face, his arms flailing weakly. "Get off me!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "It is your fault. You spent it. You wanted the penthouse. Agents swarmed them, pulling Monica off by her waist." She kicked and spat, her heels scraping against the polished wood of the stage. Her dress tore. Her hair was a wild mane. She pointed a shaking finger at him as they dragged her back. "He killed Richard," she shrieked, desperate to trade anyone for her own freedom. "He told me he did it." "I have the journals. I wrote it all down. I am a witness. I want a deal." Brandon stared at her, blood welling in deep scratches on his cheek. His eyes were wide with betrayal. The partnership of 25 years, the bond forged in blood and money, had dissolved in 30 seconds. "You witch," he spat. "You were there. You pushed the car." The agents slammed him to the deck, cuffing his hands behind his back. The metal clicked. The sound of finality. "Brandon Dawson, you are under arrest for money laundering, wire fraud, and the murder of Richard Dawson." He struggled against the weight of the agent on his back, turning his head to the side, his cheek pressed against the floorboards. His eyes found me. I hadn't moved. I was standing 5 feet away, watching the demolition of my family. "Dad!" he screamed. The word hit me in the chest. Dad. He hadn't called me that since he was 20, since before the gorge, since before he became William. "Dad, help me, look at what they are doing." The agents hauled him to his knees. He was weeping now, snot and blood mixing on his face. The arrogance was gone. The billionaire was gone. All that was left was a terrified child who had broken a window and wanted his father to fix it. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It got out of control. I can fix this. I can make it back. You have to help me. You are my father." He shuffled forward on his knees, straining against the agent's grip. "Please, Dad. I am your son. I am Brandon. Remember the fishing trip. Remember the bike. Do not let them take me. I will die in there." He looked at me with such desperate hope. He truly believed that after everything, after the theft, the lies, the attempt on my life, that the bond of blood was a get-out-of-jail-free card. He thought he could appeal to the sentimental old man he had locked in the basement. I looked down at him. I saw the scar on his chin. I remembered stitching it up. I remembered holding him when he cried. I remembered the pride I felt when he graduated. But then I remembered the cold soup. I remembered the look in his eyes in the bathroom mirror when he ordered his guards to break my ribs. I remembered the voice recording of him planning to kill me. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. It was the last tear I would ever shed for him. I looked him in the eye. The silence in the room was absolute. Even Monica had stopped screaming to listen. "You are mistaken," I said. My voice was quiet, but it carried to the back of the room. "My son is not here." Brandon froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "My son was a good man," I continued, my voice hardening into steel. "He had a heart. He loved his family. But he died 25 years ago. I buried him. I mourned him. I loved him." I took a step closer, leaning down so only he could see the absolute finality in my eyes. You are just a stranger who stole a dead man's face to hide his crimes. And I do not know you." I straightened up and looked at the agents. "Get him out of my sight." "No," Brandon wailed. It was a sound of pure desolation. "Dad, no!" The agents dragged him away. He dug his heels in, screaming my name, begging, pleading. But I turned my back. I looked out at the empty ballroom, at the debris of the party, at the shocked faces of the strangers who had worshipped a false idol. I saw Laura standing by the exit. She was crying, but she wasn't looking at her parents. She was looking at me. She nodded. A small, brave movement. I nodded back. The screams faded as the heavy doors swung shut behind them. The room was quiet. The screen behind me went dark. Arthur Wallace stepped out from the shadows of the wings. He walked over to me, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the stage. He put a hand on my shoulder. "It is done, Jerry," he said softly. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 25 years. My ribs ached. My heart ached. But the weight was gone. "Let's go, Arthur," I said, unbuttoning my tuxedo jacket. "I need a drink, and I need to start living." We walked off the stage together, leaving the empty shell of the Thorn Empire in the dark. I didn't look back. There was nothing there for me anymore. My son was dead. But I was alive. And for the first time in a long time, the future was blank, and it was mine. The Federal Detention Center in downtown Seattle was a concrete monolith that smelled of industrial cleaner and misery. It was a far cry from the penthouse suites and ballrooms my son was accustomed to. I sat in the visitor area on a metal stool that was bolted to the floor, waiting. The room was cold. My ribs still ached, a dull, throbbing reminder of the price I had paid to be here, but the pain felt distant now. It was the price of admission to the final show. When the heavy steel door buzzed open, Brandon walked in. He wasn't wearing his Italian suit. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. His silver hair was unkempt, and without the expensive products and lighting of the gala, he looked gray and old. He shuffled toward the plexiglass divider, his hands cuffed and chained to his waist. He looked at me with eyes that were hollowed out by sleepless nights and the sudden withdrawal from a life of limitless power. He sat down. He didn't pick up the phone. He just stared at me. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a shell-shocked numbness. "Pick it up," I said, my voice calm. He hesitated, then reached out with a shaking hand and lifted the receiver. "Hello, Dad," he whispered. His voice was raspy. "Hello, Brandon." "I am not Brandon," he said, a spark of the old defiance flickering in his eyes. Brandon was weak. "William Thorne built a legacy." "William Thorne is a federal inmate number 49206, I replied, "and he is looking at life without parole." He leaned forward, the chains rattling against the metal counter. "My lawyer says I can get a deal. The video is old. The audio recording from the alley is inadmissible without a warrant. I might get 20 years for the fraud, but I will be out. I will rebuild. I always do." I shook my head slowly. "You still do not get it. You think this is a negotiation. It is not. It is a foreclosure." I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin stack of documents. I pressed them against the glass so he could read the bold headings. This is a formal relinquishment of all claims to the Dawson family estate, including the house you tried to sell out from under me. And this is a permanent restraining order and disavowal of parental rights regarding Laura. You will never contact her again. You will never try to access her finances. You will never speak her name." He laughed a dry, bitter sound. "Why would I sign that? The house is worthless compared to what I lost. And Laura, she betrayed me. She is dead to me." "Good," I said. "Then signing should be easy." "I am not signing anything," he spat. "You took my money, Jerry. You took my life. I am going to fight you until the day I die. I will drag this out in court for decades. I will make sure Laura spends every penny she has on legal fees." I put the papers down. I leaned in close to the glass. "I thought you might say that. That is why I brought this." I pulled out a single photograph. It was old, grainy, and yellowed with age. It wasn't the video of the car crash. It was a picture of a toolbox. A red metal toolbox that sat in the corner of my garage for 25 years. "Do you recognize this?" I asked. He stared at it. He frowned. "It is just your toolbox." "I opened it yesterday," I said. "I was looking for a screwdriver to fix the lock you broke on the basement door. And I found something stuck behind the drawer. A receipt. Dated October 13th, 1999. The day before Richard died." Brandon went still. His eyes locked onto mine. "It is a receipt from a mechanic shop 2 towns over," I continued, "for a brake line modification. It has your signature on it, Brandon. You didn't just push him. You tampered with his car first, just in case the push didn't work. You planned it for weeks. That makes it a federal capital crime. Premeditated murder with special circumstances." His face turned the color of ash. He started to shake. "You are lying," he whispered. "I burned that receipt." "You missed one," I lied. But he didn't know that. He was a man who had built a life on lies, and he assumed everyone else was just as deceitful. The fear in his eyes was real. He knew what that receipt meant. It meant the death penalty, or at best solitary confinement until he rotted. "If you sign these papers," I said, pushing them against the glass again, "I will lose this receipt. I will let the feds stick with the fraud and the manslaughter charges. You will still go to prison, but you might see the sky again before you die. If you don't sign, I walk out of here and hand this to the prosecutor." He looked at the photo. He looked at me. The last vestige of William Thorne, the titan of industry, evaporated. He was just a scared little boy in an orange suit. "Give me the pen," he choked out. I slid the papers through the slot. He signed them, his hands trembling so hard he barely kept the pen on the line. He pushed them back. Monica was next. They brought her in 10 minutes later. She looked worse than him. Her roots were showing and her face was puffy from crying. When she saw the signed papers, she didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just looked at Brandon's signature and realized she was alone. She signed her name with a defeated scratch of the pen, giving up the house, giving up. Laura giving up the last threads of control she had over my life. "It is over, Monica," I said as I packed the documents away. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a toxic mix of hatred and misery. "You are going to hell, Jerry," she hissed. I stood up and buttoned my coat. "I already went to hell, Monica. I lived in your basement for 5 years. Now I am going home." I turned and walked away. I heard her screaming behind the glass, screaming my name, screaming for a lawyer, screaming at the unfairness of it all. But her voice was muffled, fading into the background noise of the prison. I walked out of the detention center and into the Seattle rain. The air tasted sweet. I had the papers in my hand. My house was mine again. Laura was safe, and the monsters were in a cage. I hailed a cab. For the first time in 25 years, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I was free. The sledgehammer hit the drywall with a satisfying crunch. Dust billowed into the air, coating my safety goggles in a layer of white powder. I swung again. This time the stud cracked. It wasn't wanton destruction. It was renovation. Laura stood behind me holding a crowbar, her face smeared with plaster and sweat. She wasn't the terrified girl in the rain anymore. She was a woman reclaiming her home. We didn't sell the house. I couldn't. Despite the memories, despite the years of imprisonment in the basement, this was still the place where I had been happy once. It was the place where I had raised a son before he turned into a stranger. So we decided to scrub the ghosts out. We tore down the wall that separated the kitchen from the living room, letting the light flood in. We ripped up the carpets that smelled of Monica's perfume, and most importantly, we took the door off the basement hinges and burned it in the backyard fire pit. The basement isn't a prison anymore. It is an archive. 3 months have passed since the day William Thorne ceased to exist. In that time, Laura and I have been busy. We didn't keep the money, but Arthur Wallace made sure we kept enough of the legitimate assets from the clawback to fund our new venture. We turned the ground floor of my house into an office. There is no sign out front, no advertisement in the paper, just a word-of-mouth network that started with the letters I received after the news broke. The Dawson Advocacy Group. We don't charge fees. We don't bill by the hour. We help the people who have been forgotten. The seniors whose children view them as ATMs. The widows whose financial advisors are sharking them. The people who are told they are crazy when they are actually just inconvenient. Arthur handles the legal threats. He enjoys it. He says it keeps him young to scare con artists who think they are untouchable. Laura handles the intake. She quit the hospital the day after the arrest. She said she was tired of treating symptoms, she wanted to treat the disease. She sits with our clients, she holds their hands, and she listens. She believes them. That is usually all they need, a witness to their reality. And me, I am the forensic accountant. I follow the money. I find the hidden accounts, the forged signatures, the secret transfers. I find the truth they try to bury in the spreadsheets. Yesterday, a woman named Mrs. Higgins came in. She was 82 years old, trembling, clutching a purse she had owned since 1970. She told me her nephew was managing her pension and that she couldn't understand why she couldn't afford heating oil this winter. I looked at her bank statements. I saw the transfers to a casino in Vegas. I saw the withdrawals for a new truck. I looked at her and I saw myself sitting in that chair eating cold soup. "We will get it back, Mrs. Higgins," I told her. "Every penny." She started to cry. But how, she asked. "He is family. Family does not leave you in the cold," I said. "Family is the people who bring you a blanket." We are going to court for her next week. Arthur says we will win. I know we will win because I already found the nephew's second set of books. People ask me if I regret donating the $200 million. They ask me if I ever wake up in the middle of the night wishing I had kept just a little bit of the Thorne fortune. I tell them no, and I mean it. That money was heavy. It was weighted down with the soul of my dead son and the greed of his wife. I didn't want to carry it. I wanted to be light. I have my pension. I have my house. I have enough to buy a good steak on Fridays and a bottle of wine to share with Arthur on the porch. I have Laura who comes over for dinner every night and tells me about her day without looking at her phone once. That is wealth. That is the only currency that matters. Tonight, after we closed the files and locked the office, Laura and I sat on the back porch watching the sun go down over the tree line. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and wood smoke. "You know, Grandpa," she said, swirling the ice in her tea, "I got a letter today. From Dad." I stiffened. The restraining order was supposed to prevent that. "What did it say?" I asked. She shrugged. "He wants me to visit. He says he has changed. He says he found God in his cell. He says he forgives me. She laughed a dry sound that was too old for her 28 years. He forgives me, she repeated, shaking her head. Can you believe the arrogance? What are you going to do? I asked. She took the letter out of her pocket. It was unopened. She had just read the return address. She walked over to the fire pit, where the embers of the basement door were still glowing. She tossed the envelope in. We watched the paper curl and blacken, watched the blue ink of the federal prison stamp turn to ash. I am going to help Mrs. Higgins get her heating oil, she said. That is what I am going to do. I smiled. She was going to be all right. We were going to be all right. Before I went inside, I reached into my own pocket. I pulled out the photo I had shown Brandon in the prison, the grainy picture of the red toolbox. I looked at it one last time. There was no receipt behind the drawer. There never was. I had bluffed. I had looked him in the eye and lied with the same conviction he had used on me for 25 years. The difference was my lie bought freedom. His bought a cage. I struck a match and held it to the corner of the photo. I watched it burn until the flame licked my fingertips. I dropped it into the ash alongside Laura's letter. My son left for work one morning 25 years ago and never came back. I used to pray for his return. I used to leave the porch light on. But I don't do that anymore. The man in the cell isn't my son. My son is a memory, a ghost of a boy who caught fireflies in this yard and laughed when he jumped his bike over the creek. That boy is gone. But I am still here. And as I turned off the porch light and walked into my warm, bright house, I realized that for the first time in a quarter of a century, I wasn't waiting for anyone. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Home. The hardest truth I ever had to accept was that the son I loved was the architect of my misery. For years, I confused abuse for family obligation and neglect for grief. But this journey taught me that dignity has no expiration date. You are never too old, too weak, or too broken to demand the respect you deserve. True family isn't defined by the blood in your veins, but by the hands that hold you when you fall. If you are reading this from your own basement of despair, know this: the only way out is to stop waiting for permission to save yourself. If my story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to cut ties with toxic family to save your own soul, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your experience in the comments below. I read every single one.